What's up, everybody? How you doing? Welcome back to the Punk Rock Review podcast, man. Me and Rob are hanging out today. I just had a really great conversation with Bones from Lower Class Brats. I'm feeling the vibes right now, man. But today with Rob, we are going to talk about two very seminal, important introductions to two important bands. We're going to talk about Jawbreaker, Unfun, their debut album, and was it 1039 Smooth Out Slappy?
39 Smooth.
39 Smooth, whatever the fuck it's called.
Well,
Green Day's first record.
all that extra stuff was added on to a later release, and so that's how Spotify and stuff listens to it. But 39
Thank
Smooth.
Goodness. Okay, 39 Smooth by Green Day. So it tells you how much I know about it, right? So those are the two albums that we're going to talk about today. In length, we're going to review them, talk about the I don't know, just the history of them a little bit, to at least to the extent of my knowledge. I think Rob probably is going to know a little bit more about specifically Jawbreaker than me because you've read more books that include them. And as I was listening to this and doing a little bit of research, I was really regretting not starting it like a day or two before. I did start it I don't do this last day, but I should have started it like last week or 2 weeks ago when we ended the last one. I should have jumped on it right away. So I've only been doing it for about a week, and I should have listened to more of some of these books. But yeah, man. Where do you want to start? Let's start with Unfun. Let's start with Unfun. Okay, so what's up, guys? So we just partnered up with Dead and Buried Inc. out of LA. So if you have a band or a small business, maybe an event coming up, and you need merch, hit these dudes up. There's a link in the description. If you mention that you got there via the Punk Rock Review, you'll get 10% off of your first order. But it's super high quality screen printing, embroidery. They do shirts, hats, hoodies, skateboards, bags, whatever you want printed, they can handle it, all right? They're also a small business, and they're part of the punk rock community. They're my friends. So this is a partnership that's very important to me. If you need merch, hit these dudes up. Check them out. You won't be disappointed, all right? Back to the video. All right, 1 second. I apologize. All right. So yeah, May of 1990, we get Unfun, the debut album, studio album anyways, by what is called on Wikipedia an American punk rock band, Jawbreaker. It was on Shredder Records, 41 minutes. I think it's only got like 14 songs, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. No, it had 12 songs. 12 songs. It was kind of like, they're kind of long. Or in regard to like the stuff that I listen to, typically being sub 2 minute songs. But yeah, man. So I don't know where you want to start here. Do you want to take a little bit of the initial talk on Jawbreaker, or do you want me to read some of the wiki stuff? Because I'll tell you, man, we can start talking about their music first. Let's start there.
Yeah, let's do that.
How much have you heard this record? How much time did you spend with this record before we decided to pick it for the show?
So both this record and the record we're going to talk about later have the same sort of place in my music listening catalog that I will generally throw them on once a year, basically, when I'm in a big binge for other albums that the bands have done. So basically, and much less so with the next album we're going to talk about, I should say.
Okay.
And probably because there's a little bit less of Jawbreaker to consume. But like usually with me, it's I want to go on a 24-hour revenge therapy, just like month, and that kind of happens. And so kind of in the midst of that, you're filling Jawbreaker, so you go around, and I tend to listen to it then. It's one that outside of the title track though, these songs don't resonate with me in terms of like they stand out a lot, and it's not because they're really really bad. They just sound a lot like the other two Jawbreaker albums. So I feel like sometimes a lot of their songs that aren't on 24-hour revenge therapy can kind of blend together with me, because they are such a dense band with such dense songs, and like there's a lot of, and this album specifically has a lot of stuff thrown into it in the course of like those songs. So this album kind of is a lot. And unlike 24-hour revenge therapy, it's not necessarily like a catchy album, although there's a lot of pop sensibilities throughout the album. I don't think it's a very it's not a catchy kind of throw on while you're doing nothing kind of album. It's one I like to dive into a little bit when I turn on, but I will generally go towards 24-hour revenge therapy. So I kind of will stick with Unfun for one listen, like I said, about once a year. That's about the routine that I get on it.
So this will probably not shock anybody. I'm not a big fan of Jawbreaker. I don't like Husker Du. I don't like Jawbreaker typically, but I base a lot of my Jawbreaker like opinions on Dear You because that's the first Jawbreaker record that I heard. And so I was handed it by somebody. Here, check this out. You might like it. I was listening to a lot of Alkaline Trio and stuff, and they're like, you might like this. And I didn't really care for it. And then I found 24-Hour Revenge Therapy. I liked it okay. I don't know if I've only maybe listened to this one or two times before this, like, deciding to listen to it right now. And if I did, I don't remember it. But I was flabbergasted at how much I enjoyed listening to this.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This was like, I know, dude. It's like,
wow.
It's like this is like the intersection of Husker Du and Green Day where they meet, and I go, oh, if either of those bands would have sounded more like this, I would have liked them. And I understand that I'm probably just going to be stuck on early Jawbreaker stuff as the stuff I like because of some things that happened to the singer in later in life, and so, but I'm okay with that. Like, I'd rather like one album than no albums. Like that, I'm perfectly okay with that. I respected Jawbreaker. I respect Husker Du. I just don't listen to the music. But dude, his vocals are insane. I was listening to it, and I was like, this is not what I was expecting this to sound like. Even a little bit.
Well, it's pre his throat surgery, and that's,
right.
That's the key.
That's when
it changes the tone of their music, and I have that in my notes for today, and I had never thought about it because this is kind of morbid, but I do like the throat surgery in terms of the songs it gave us for 24-Hour Revenge Therapy. Okay. I kind of, in a sick way, it's just part of the band's canon and part of like they're a band that has 5 songs or 6 songs about this dude's throat surgery, and they're pretty good songs, so it's very much part of their lore, I think. But listening to especially 100%. Some of the like song the tracks on the back half of this album, I was freaked out how much there actually isn't a ton of instrumentation in those songs the way you're used to a Jawbreaker, and it's a lot of Blake's voice just carried it like almost. And it's weird because it's pre-throat surgery, but his voice sounds gravelly beyond the years that he would have actually been in life at that time. They wrote these songs. Both the albums we're going to talk about today were written in when the guys are basically high school, early college age, and recorded and composed in that time period. And it's amazing how gravelly his voice actually was because you don't associate Blake's voice as much with that.
Part of it is, and not because I'm a spectacular vocalist, but when I was in a band, that was my duties, was vocals. That isn't, at least as far as I can tell, a natural sounding vocal pattern. That is him wanting it to sound that way. So what is funny is that when I was listening to it, I was like, man, I don't remember him ever sounding like this. And then I went and listened to a couple of songs off of 24 Hours, then went and listened to a song or two off of Dear You, just to make sure that I was like, man, am I tripping, dude? Did I really just miss this whole dude's career? Because I heard like one song I didn't like, and then I was like, nope, I just don't like the later stuff. And I was like, why would he switch his vocals up? And I was like, outside of maybe signing to a major, and I was like, oh man, is that what really happened? I was like, I couldn't remember. I was like, I don't know a lot about Jawbreaker, so I was like, I can't remember. So I looked it up, and that's why I have the wiki pages open, because I was reading about it earlier, and I was like, oh, that's right, dude. This is like 24 Hour was our last indie record. Dear You was their indie debut, correct?
No. So Dear You is their major debut.
Wait, I said that wrong. That's what I meant. 24 Hours was like the last indie record they did, and then Dear You was their first major label debut. Excuse me.
All 3 of their underground indie albums are on very indie labels. Like they were never on Epitaph or one of those.
No, I just misspoke. I meant Dear You was their major label debut is what I meant to say.
Yeah, and like, sometimes there can be that with a band where they're like super underground and then they have like an Epitaph record. It's kind of like a major debut and then a major. And they were always on these tiny little labels because, as I think we mentioned before, the band was always on the verge of breaking up. Like with
they broke up like 3 times.
So there was never like this thought, I think, for them to invest in one of these indies that they were really going to go. Every album they made it on the pretext of we're going to make this album and then quit, and that was kind of the entirety of their career.
As I'm listening to this, and I listened to the later material, I was like, dude, what would make these guys go this direction with their music after having such a really great like mix of melodic, hardcore, punk rock, indie, like. This first album is literally what I wish Husker Du sounded like, so that I could like Husker Du a little bit more. But I can see they're influenced by them heavily, and I was like, what would make them go that direction? And then I thought, oh, was it pressure from the label? I completely forgot the dude had a vocal surgery, and when I started reading on it again, I was like, oh, dude, they had no choice but to go that direction. Like Like Avenged Sevenfold. Look, I
Yeah,
know, I get it, but like
same
same
thing.
thing,
Yeah.
man. Same thing.
But there's another metal band too. I think it's Trivium or one of those where the singer
Mm,
notoriously has a blown out voice. And
no kidding.
yeah, and it's funny because again, in pop punk, a blown out voice you wouldn't think is the biggest kill. And there's a lot of other guys in bands that we like that have blown out voices, and their second half of their career is a lot more singy. I think it was really just their evolution and what they wanted to be, kind of like a 90s Husker Du and that kind of thing, where they were very much into punk, influenced by punk, but it wasn't they were, again, compared to the other Gilman bands and stuff like that, they were just a little bit older than those guys. So they're more people of the 80s, I think, that were operating in the 90s. And then again, these songs are compiled. So it's really weird. The drummer and guitarist were like friends and didn't move to New York for music, but were friends who played in bands and went to college together and kept playing music with people. So they kind of took these songs with them from those early periods to there. They met their bass player when they were in college in New York, and then they moved back to finish this album. And they often talk about like the finishing of this album was really cool because it was the first time the three of them weren't balancing going to college and working on a record. But I would say that's probably why there's so much packed into this record, because it's one of those classic early album unedited records where everything you have, there's no filter of the influence, there's no real decisions. Everything you have was just kind of thrown out there because it was like all the songs that they had written basically.
Right.
And that's what debut albums tend to be.
Well, it was funny. As I'm listening to it, I just kept thinking like all the bands that I don't like that are like that college rock or grunge or like whatever parallel you want to put with punk. Because in the 90s, you did have a lot of like everything kind of touched in different genres. A lot of bands, like that was the beauty of punk, is that you had a definite lane. But outside that, you had bands that like kind of identified as punk and grunge and college radio and indie, but they're all in the same basket, right? And so you had all these little offshoots. But I thought this Jawbreaker record is the perfect amalgamation of the two. It's got a little bit of punk in it, but it's got all the other stuff from the bands I don't typically like. But this is how I would like them if they were a little bit more like this. So they had a little more, and I don't know. There was an appreciation that I didn't expect, that and I think like this, dude. I'm turning 43 in 6 days. I'm just older. Like I like different shit. My palate is changing. I'm growing as a music fan. I'm growing as an adult. And also my channel is forcing things on me that without my channel, I wouldn't have. If I didn't do this channel, I would have never sat down and listened to these records today. I would have just played Rancid albums or whatever. No Effects, Bad Religion, Unseen, Casualties, whatever like typical stuff you would see me listening to on a daily basis. But forcing myself to listen to this stuff has opened up a lot of, I don't know what to call it. Maybe not doors, but like ears. It's opened up my ears a lot to like different stuff. I don't know. It's interesting because maybe this is a step towards liking a band like Husker Du. And I know that Nitty loves that band and really just doesn't understand why I don't like them. And I don't know that I understand either. I just hear it and I don't dig it. But baby steps. You get there, who knows?
I think Jawbreaker is that for a lot of people. Like I think of Jawbreaker, even though they wouldn't necessarily classify themselves as that, but I think of them as like my classic emo band. And they're not classic emo, but they are sort of my access point to that. And what I think their real legacy is they were the band that gave permission or sort of gave carte blanche to expand the sound of pop punk in the late 90s, because all the bands we like, whether they went big or not, like you guys were talking about Lagwagon on your show, you get so much Lagwagon. Lagwagon has whole songs dedicated to Jawbreaker. We talked about Alkaline Trio last week. Those are two bands that don't sound like each other, but they have tons of influence from this band. And I think so I think the kids that were in, like we were talking about, like that specific lane. So the kids that were into a lot of that underground stuff, like you said, they like the punk, the indie rock. And I think what you were getting at too, like if you just listen to college radio, what was great about it is all those different flavors of independent music could kind of coexist. That's like college radio, although the core genre is sort of that indie basement rock. Right. But punk is very much, in America, has lived off of college rock radio for quite some time. So for me, like that is the legacy of the band, is all these pop punkers who are mostly going to be like the bands that like we're going to talk about next week, like Mr. T Experience and those kind of guys who had this real straightforward pop punk formula, but I think we're exposed to the Husker Dus and the same influences that these guys do found what these bands did. So the Ramones core bands kind of stayed, I think, in that true pop punky fashion. But more a lot of those late 90s bands, I think they were influenced by that kind of emo sound, and the way they knew to put it into their music was the way that Jawbreaker do it. Now, Jawbreaker didn't like any of those bands really. They didn't think those bands really followed in. They liked even the more corny emo that came in like the mid 2000s. They thought that was actually cool. They thought that was actually more of the offshoot of them than the bands that. And it's just funny because the people you influence, that's not always the audience. I don't know if they. It's not true because Jawbreaker was very much part of the scene. So I don't want to say that, but it's
they don't strike me as fans of a lot of these bands. I can't imagine them being like big fans of Lagwagon or big fans of Alkaline Trio.
Well, they would.
Now, do they like the guys in the band? Probably.
Yeah.
Would they like some of their songs? Sure, but like to the extent that we're fans of that stuff, and there's no way.
Well, yeah, and I don't think that many people, especially if you're like a musical influenced person, are that big of fans of stuff that comes after you anyway. Like, so, and I think that's
valid.
I think that's part of it. Here's the other thing that I always think about with them. So for me, I think got to experience them right at the end of their run, right? Probably, or no, it's years later, right? This is years later, but you got exposed through Dear You. So I would assume a lot of your peers who would have given that kind of music a chance would have really liked Jawbreaker. That's like one of those bands that you were probably hearing about for people that like that kind of music.
So I skated, right? And when Weezer came out, I was already into punk, but all my skater friends liked Weezer, and through Weezer they got into Jawbreaker. That's how that's how that happened. And I liked Weezer, okay, so they were like, "Here, listen to this." And like also Pixies, Nirvana fans also like Jawbreaker. Like so there was like a commonality. So Green Day fans, Weezer fans, Nirvana, Pixies, all those guys like Jawbreaker. Now the fans of like the Casualties, Dead Kennedys, Unseen, Black Flag, they didn't necessarily like Jawbreaker, and that's the camp that I kind of fit in mostly, right? But I also hung out. Dude, the 90s was a fucking mixed bag, dude. You got trail mix everywhere. You didn't have a bag of fucking peanuts or cashews, dude. You got trail mix, dude. You just got like a smorgasbord of flavors, and if you don't like it, too bad. It's all in a big bag together.
We're all siloed now. We can all watch our, like my Spotify is exactly what I want to see, what you want to see. Back then you'd have these bills with a lot of these bands that were just vaguely, all these bands that listened to the same bands but didn't sound anything like each other, that could be
crazy
on similar bills. And so for like Jawbreaker, they were almost like a ghost to me. They were almost like mythical to me when I started getting into this kind of music, because all the people I liked, it was like their favorite band that didn't exist anymore. It was just like the weirdest. And I think in like the early 2000s, late 90s, there wasn't losers like us on podcasts who were just going over the same albums over and over again. So it's just, they were like this mythical thing. Like, what is up with Jawbreaker? So and even their name, I thought they were going to be some really intense, like, jawbreaking, some like street punk band. And then,
really?
Yeah, just off of the name and stuff. And then I remember I heard a lot of bands covering Boxcar from 24 Hour Revenge Day, which sounds much more like a pop punk song than anything else in their catalog. But then going through it and then listening to it, you get why everyone, at least I do, I get why it resonated with the people that produce the kind of music that we make, but I also kind of get why it resonated with a lot of fans back in the day. But I think what ended up happening with them is they were one of those all or nothing bands for a lot of their fans. Like, their fans were so into them. And then so whenever they would make a mistake or something that some of their core fan base did, like, the backlash to them would be really, really intense. And part of that, I think, was that they were older, so they were probably a little bit. I don't think that they were friendly with everyone. I know, like, Ben Weasel and Blake were friends, and they were good friends with really all the East Bay crew guys. But I don't know how much they really hung out with like just the general public in the East Bay, because they're like 24-year-old college dudes versus all these other guys who are like 17 years old, borrowing money to go hang out at Gilman. And Jawbreaker was one of the biggest bands at Gilman. They were huge, but like part of that expansion of their universe, as we were talking about, because they were older, but they're in this scene that's blowing up with Green Day and Op Ivy and all these guys, but they're able to play at over 21 bars a lot more often than a lot of these. So they're exposed to these other kind of bands. And it's off of this album and Booviac is where Kurt Cobain becomes this huge Jawbreaker fan and invites them to go on tour in the early 90s. A lot of
their fans didn't like that.
Yeah, people saying that they sold out by being invited on the tour, which is funny because, like, I laugh at this. They sold out so much that they found a way to sell their t-shirts in the parking lot to avoid like whatever the Live Nation was at the time that's taking the fee of the merch. And it was like they sold so much merch on that tour. People wanted their tour. Kurt Cobain wore the shirt for the next 3 days after they left the tour. So this thing that should have really been a boon for them. And again, they weren't signed to a major. They were riding in a van behind all these other big things, but just the invitation to be on that tour was one of those things that just pissed people off.
It's because people are jealous, man. And like, here's the thing: is like, okay, this might make sense to some people that don't understand my problem. I don't even say problem. My lack of fandom for this band up until recently, right?
Mm.
When I was younger, Jawbreaker was the band that when you had like that hot, intelligent girl that was hanging out and you wanted to impress her, it was Jawbreaker. Jawbreaker and like Saves the Day and like, Taking Back Sunday, all those bands.
That's the boy music. Yeah.
Yeah. So like
Yeah.
I couldn't get into it back then because I was so full of piss and vinegar that like I needed something a little more upbeat. So I was never gonna like this music when it first came out, and I was never gonna like it when I was young. I had to get it later on in life, but I remember being like having resentment towards these kind of bands because like I was like, I don't get it. Why can't I just like the music that I like and then people not really care? It's like, no, you have to impress people with the stuff you like because that's the groups of people I was hanging out with. Music heads. There's a certain like social ladder within music that like if you don't like this band, you're not cool. And back then I wasn't secure within my own nerddom. Like I wasn't okay with the fact that I was just a punk rock kid. I just so desperately wanted to be cared about and liked and talked to. It wasn't about like popularity more so than it was company. I wanted company. I was lonely when I was young, man. I didn't have a lot of friends and I didn't have a lot of family. So like I spent a lot of time by myself, and music like this, I didn't understand it. Like the things they were talking about was not stuff that I was taking part in. Like I never went to college. They even had like topical stuff that I just didn't resonate with. You know what I'm saying? I was much more in the it's more punk rock, with the anti-fascist movements and wanting to be out on my own and rebellion is the word I was looking for, like just straight rebellious lyrical content. And I wasn't what's the word, man? Like esteemed enough. I didn't get it quite yet. I wasn't really there. I wasn't. Yeah.
Jawbreaker has that vibe to them, and it's not their fault necessarily, but they're the fandom around, and that's what I was saying. They were kind of mythical. Like I remember feeling uncool for a while because I didn't know Jawbreaker.
Right.
It was just kind of like well, I don't know, dude. I'm like 11. How the hell the album came out when I was 3? How should I know Jawbreaker?
I'm 16 and I listen to Blink-182. What makes you think I like Jawbreaker? There's so much more ahead of where I'm at.
Exactly. That's literally where the kind of, I don't care that Tom's talking about this Jawbreaker brand, has the Husker Du thing on his guitar, and is talking about this Descendant, which
if you think about it, the thing is that those guys that we were listening to were older than us by like 5 to 10 years. So they were into Jawbreaker. Of course they were. But we were young and we're listening to what we liked, which is these guys that are just a little bit older. So we're like, yeah, we want to like this stuff. This is like, and that's why when bands like Angels and Airwaves and Boxcar Racer come out, it doesn't surprise me because those bands were listening to that stuff, and all those bands are incredibly influenced by stuff outside of the punk rock landscape. So,
which is funny too, because
myself at all.
A lot of those bands though too that loved Jawbreaker but didn't sound like them at the time, that I would have like. All those bands, if you look at their career, how they went, look at the second half of Blink-182's career and tell me they didn't listen to a ton of Jawbreaker through their more drawn out emo eras, and the way they like, and a lot of it's the hip hop influence, obviously, of Travis and all that. But like, they laugh at people calling them an emo band because they refer to themselves as like a Jawbreaker copying band, which they didn't really think of Jawbreaker as emo, back in the most traditional senses. And that's why I really like them, as like, they created whatever like this bastardized emo is that the old emo heads didn't like. And I think people like you and I kind of didn't like it just because it was the music of younger people. Like for me, that mid 2000s emo is the stuff that like I was just like it just cringed me.
Yeah, I don't like any of that.
Even though like a lot of the fictions of it were not that different than my Warped Tour music from 3 years prior, but I couldn't vibe with that. And it's part of that is just time going on, and you're just a little bit older. You don't know when you're 21 or 20, you don't like the things that 14-year-olds like. Like that's the most cool thing in the world. I was
just gonna say that when you're just a like college age or a little bit older, the stuff high school kids are into, you want to distance yourself from it because you're just like, no, I only like more mature stuff than that. Oh, I don't like Good Charlotte would be a great example. Like I do not like that band, but I feel like if I was born 5 years later, I might have liked them okay, because I would have had a whole completely different view on music. I wouldn't have gotten into Rancid when I got into them. Everything would have been 5 to 10 years later in my life. So I think Good Charlotte might have been a band that I've been like, that's my guilty pleasure. Whereas like I genuinely do not like their music right now, because when I was 23, 24, they were coming out. And I was like, oh, what the fuck is this garbage? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
But people that are like younger than me by 5 to 10 years are like, yeah, they're all right. And I'm like, I understand it. I just disagree.
I think that has a lot to do with like whatever is the pop music, regardless of genre. Whenever you're like young, whenever you're in that super young period, even if you say you don't like it, you are you're kind of it's the music that's going on for better or worse at the time that you're like your body felt the best that it ever did. Like even if your young life isn't so great, there's still a certain fondness that we have to things that we experienced when we were growing up. And I think some of that, if you didn't experience some of that stuff that's just straight up pop music, it doesn't resonate with you. We talked about that a couple weeks on the best episode. It's like, I know you're not going to like this because this only would work if you were 16 when you heard it the first time. And then it's like the Cars for people that heard the Cars in like 1983. You know, it's forever with them. And I think you're like that with like a lot of Ramones core stuff. Like a lot of the cheesier music you like comes from that.
Ramones core,
a lot of that Ramones core stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point.
Would have popped right around that time of adolescence with you. A lot of that stuff kind of fits all those parameters.
Yeah,
I think everyone has those kind of outlets. I think Jawbreaker is that, I think, for a lot of punks as sort of the other thing that, because it's acceptable, you know, to listen to Jawbreaker. So I think
they've come around to being like the cool band again. Like they're fully back as like another band. I mean, I say again, it's probably been that way for a long time now, but like Jawbreaker is highly regarded kings of their subgenre. Like, you know, people strive to be like them. They're cited as references in a lot of, or inspirations and references in a lot of these other bands' catalogs.
They're like the older kids from like a previous like football team or something that won state that no one has footage from that game. I feel like that's the weird thing. And because again, they broke up early, they disappeared before the real boom of the music. And I think their breakup was so ugly and stuff, and everything felt ugly about that, so that they were kept at it almost benefited them to have that like myth. I think if they would have they've been back together a few times and they played some shows and like everyone has done, you know, as the years have gone on. But had they have got back together like in 2001 to be a supporting act for like a Blink-182 or something like that, it would have been a disaster. Like that would have been terrible. They needed to not be one of these bands that was just so commercialized. And I think they were one of those bands too that maybe their biggest punk bona fide of all of them is they really had trouble with like the music business. That just did, even though they were a very accessible band for a lot of people, they still, like a lot of these punk bands, they couldn't quite play the game in the right kind of way. There's a story on like how on Dear You, they wanted, because I mean the label did not like the album, just straight up. They didn't think it was great, but they did negotiate full creative control, as a lot of the indie bands did back then. If they were going to sign, they were going to, you know, you're not going to mess with their stuff. And they re-recorded Boxcar, and they wanted to put Boxcar on Dear You. And it was the band members who said, absolutely, we're not going to swindle our fans. That belongs to our old fans. That's their song. The reason the label wanted to put it on that way, there's a big song that the crowd goes wild for when they play and they seem like big stars. And they were like, no, that belongs to our fans that have been with us since day one. The other, you know, these newer fans don't get to just claim that song. And I'm like, damn, that's awesome. But also, when you look at how their career went, it was probably those sort of principles that did them in. But I kind of don't care.
I think that's like, stupid. Cooler. I think it's stupid, man.
No,
I think it's stupid because it's like, I understand the sentiment. I understand what they're saying, and I don't disagree with that way of thinking. But you're stealing from your new fans at that point. So what? You don't want your new fans to hear this because they're not cool enough? Like, what kind of dumb shit is that? Like, just put the song on the record. Have a little bit more success, make the label happy. They might give you a little more freedom, do what you want your next record. Like, it sounds to me like a big giant mistake that they made. And like, I don't know. I understand that. I guess I kind of feel both of them. I understand both sides of that coin. Like, because I get it being like, no, man, we want to just move on from that. We've already created that. But I also look at it from like a financial perspective. Like, hey, man, we've invested a lot of money and time into you. Can we please have a song that's going to make sure we don't lose our ass? You know, being the stuff that I do, I kind of understand that. Like, and I also think it makes sense to give a new audience a song that's for sure good. But, you know, being the musician and the artist, you're like, I don't want to. And I understand that too. So don't sign the contract with the artist if you're not going to let the artist do the artist things.
I don't think I would make that same decision either. I think I would put the song on there. I just think it's like, it really, like, they were that sort of militant in the way they kind of went about all things, that it just shows there's a certain admirable quality to it, of the way that Jawbreaker, all these bands talk about making compromises and not making compromises, and you don't think of it in like a, an emo poppy band
Right.
like Jawbreaker, but they were like the most unflinching, even though they signed to the label, they were very unflinching in all of these things. And them signing to the label, I think, was the feeling that they had peaked, and then that, like a lot of these bands, the scene turned on them anyway. And for them in 1994, Green Day are millionaires. Nirvana, who likes them, they're about to come down. Everyone around them's life is changing, and everyone whose life is changing is saying, "What a great band this band is!" And they're they're not
Well,
making
then
any money doing it.
stop worrying about everybody calling you a sellout and just sell the fuck out and take the money, man. I've never understood that, because you're going to resent your audience and your peers if you don't just go where it's naturally taking you. Like, if it's organically taking you somewhere and you can get a record deal and go get some money without having to really sell out your principles, then you're not actually selling anything out. But the thing is, people are so worried about what everybody else thinks that they're terrified to go make this decision. Fuck you, man. It's good for me. I'm going to do it. If you don't like me after that, that's because you never liked me at all. You only like the idea of me being independent and me being your little thing. You're gatekeeping my music. That's not for you to do. Fuck off. I want everybody to hear it. I got bills to pay. Like, you can only be so punk rock for so long. At a certain point, you have got to concern yourself with your financial stability. And, yeah, they probably did get miserable after that. Can you imagine giving up the opportunity to be of the same ilk of Nirvana and Green Day? And you're just like, no, I want to be DIY. Fuck off. You're out of your mind. No. I will take that money and then I'll do Foxborough hot tubs and Pinhead gunpowder. Gee, somebody we know did it right. Like, what are we talking about? It's so crazy, man. I get so tired of the elitist punk rock argument, because I guess it's because I've been poor my whole life, so I understand it. It's like, no, dude, take it, man. Like, you only get one chance sometimes. But they're legendary in the process. So, like, what do I know? What the fuck am I talking about?
It's easy when it's not your money and your livelihood too. Because I'm like, yeah, that's awesome that Jawbreaker did that. But like, they're
right,
maybe
dude,
thinking about like, maybe if we could have had another album out of it or something. And part of the whole thing is if their major label album wouldn't have been such a dud. That's the difference between them and Green Day and Nirvana and those ones. And I don't think it's as bad as its reputation, but it's their flop album. So it has that reputation of being like extra. It has a reputation of being worse than it probably actually is, because in the narrative of things, it killed the band. So it sort of,
I don't know what the reputation of it is. I genuinely don't. I thought it was a popular album until very recently, so I didn't know that it was like thought of as bad. But when I listened to it recently, I was like, this shit is terrible. So
the guys we were talking about who loved Jawbreaker, who loved him, like who wanted to make music, they all pretty much appreciate it as just another evolution of Jawbreaker. And but it was it was one of those things where the label didn't like stop promoting it after like a couple weeks into the promotion of it, that it was doing that bad. Like, it was one of those that it tanked commercially. It was one of those things where I think they pissed off the fans that didn't like them for signing. And then the fans that would have given them a chance, the newer audience they were exposed to, didn't really like the music that they were presented. So, and then the band never got along. So it just sucks. Like, I always feel like there's such like a tragic tale, not tragic, because I mean, they didn't die or anything, but it's just like, I guess music or different types of art, those sort of artists exist, right? That just have that little moment in time. And then, and sometimes like their moment in time and forgotten about. Jawbreaker was not forgotten about. They were just like, they're a moment in time. And then, but it's just, even like their music sounds frozen in time. It's weird. Maybe because they just don't have a lot of it. It's weird.
Yeah, right? They don't have a lot of music. That is for sure. I mean, they've got a fair bit. 4 albums isn't nothing to Scott. Was it 5 maybe? I don't know. However many it is. But
four on the original run, and then there's like a later release that I don't know if that's an album or a compilation. But like the original run is 4 albums. Yeah.
So 4 albums. I mean, that's a fair bit of music. But it's also like when you look at bands like Green Day and even Rancid, they've got like 10. It's like they just kept it pushing. They kept going. Even they took breaks and stuff like. But yeah, I do feel some sympathies for them, because it's like, man, they were in a weird place at a weird point in time where they had to try to maintain some kind of integrity that wasn't actually there. That the whole, it's just not there. It's not real. It's not real. You got to take care of yourself. Like I'm so glad that I understand that, because when I was in my 20s, I definitely probably thought like, no, I would never do that, blah blah blah. And I'm glad I never got the opportunity to fuck myself like that, because boy, I tell you, I would resent myself so much. if I had the opportunity to be a millionaire in my 20s and it was like, no, I'm going to be super fucking punk rock. It's like, nobody cares, dude. Nobody cares about you. Those people don't care about you. When it comes down to it, are they going to help you financially? Nope. So like, take care of yourself, bro. How different do I act when I got a family? You know what I'm saying? Like, if I didn't have kids, I probably wouldn't be saying any of this.
Yeah, I mean that's the perspective of everything, and that's why Jawbreaker is so confounding, because you don't have, like, we're going to talk about Green Day in a little bit, and last year we talked about a band of guys that were nearing their 60s, and then we're going to talk a little bit about guys who were 17 years old when they wrote an album. Now, Jawbreaker kind of had the vibe of like they're an old soul kind of band. I think Blake was an old soul, like he's an old man just by heart, and his lyrical delivery, his lyrics, the stuff it's about. He's sort of like he affects that kind of style, but we never got to see an evolution with them. We never got to see them making contrast albums to like the poppy stuff in the 2000s. Because sometimes some of these pioneers, they'll go like underground, or they'll do something different, completely different than the stuff that they're inspiring. And I feel like, we kind of missed out on it. But then again,
well,
like Fat Mike said, the Ramones have a lot of albums that people don't like because they stayed around so long. So maybe that's the case too. Maybe we wouldn't like them as much if they were there longer.
You remember? I don't remember what made me think of this a second ago, but I guess probably talking about their major label flop. Do you remember when Pinkerton came out? Maybe not. Maybe you're not old enough to remember that.
No, I know it's got the legacy of
So when that album came out, dude, everybody's rewriting history. They're like, Pinkerton's a great album. I'm like, I remember when Pinkerton came out. Everybody, myself included, hated that record. It was awful. But people change, and as you grow up, so people listen to it again. It's just like me listening to this Green Day album and having a different opinion on it than I did a little while back. Specifically Jawbreaker. Like, I used to really just not get it. And listening to this album, I had a blast listening to it, man. I really, really enjoyed it. I put like 5 or 6 songs on my personal playlist. It takes a lot for me to do that. So
I do think, before we get into the songs, I do think what is good about this album is that, like, say if this is the only album you listen to, you basically do get the full Jawbreaker experience. Like, it's not my favorite of their albums, but you can like Jawbreaker, you can like this album and kind of, I think, say you like or understand or appreciate Jawbreaker, because it's enough, even though it's a debut album, it's authentic enough to their sound, their songwriting, all those things.
That's what it is. It's more pure Jawbreaker. It's not been around for a few years, changed their opinions on things. No, this is when they started the band, this is what they were envisioning. And that's what I thought was great about listening to it. And I was just so damn happy that I liked it, because I was really expecting to be like, nope, thought it sucked. And people don't like my opinion sometimes. And I think people will be pleasantly surprised that I enjoyed this enough to really kind of fawn over it a little bit.
Yeah. 24-Hour Revenge Therapy, you didn't like at all. So I was expecting you
that album
to not
sucks.
like this. Yeah.
Okay, sucks is a strong word. That song is not good. I mean, that album, is not good to me. I need to go back and re-listen to it after listening to this one, though, I'll be honest.
It might have a slightly different.
Right. Dude, it's so annoying.
I've listened to it a little bit, because again, it puts me in the Jawbreaker mood, and it's not that different, but it's like it is a contrast.
His vocals are quite a bit different on it, and that's what I liked about this album the most. But it really drives me nuts when I have to go back and eat some crow and be like, okay, I changed my mind, because I change my mind all the time, and that people don't understand that about me, dude. My mind changes. Like, I like what I like on the day that I wake up. Tomorrow I may not like it, and tomorrow I may like something more. I don't let that bother me too much. It just drives me nuts when people can't understand it, because people don't get that. I guess people like what they like and they stick with it forever. And I'm like, I kind of fluctuate. I'm like, no, I like what I like now. And as an example, I like that Cheshire Cat. Remember what I said about that album 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
I hated that record. I listened to it recently, and I had a blast. I don't know what's going on with me right now, bro. I don't know what is going on with me. I have no idea.
Your Descendants conversion is my favorite of all of them.
Oh my goodness, dude.
Your conversions.
Well, dude, the Clash one's probably the most insane. Like, how many bands have I hated on?
The Clash one's funnier because you declared them dead as it, like.
Dude,
of how you felt about them. That one's funny.
Man, the Descendants, I just thought they were overrated. And then I watched the documentary and was like, oh, I get it now. Milo's just like my kid. And then I was like, oh, all these songs make sense to me now. And then I saw him live and I was like, oh, it is my kid. Jeez Louise, what have I been thinking all these years? Like, if I didn't have my kid, I probably would hate the Descendants still. Oh, man. But like, hey, look, dude, I have no qualms with the fact that I'm like kind of, somebody said narrow-minded, and I don't know that it's necessarily a bad thing. I just like what I like, and I'm okay with that. I'm secure within my own skin, dude. Some people can't do that. I don't care. If you don't like what I like, I don't understand why it's such a big deal, man. I like what I like. I'm allowed to. It shouldn't bother you that much. But I do think it's a little courageous of me to consistently be able to go back and either go, okay, this wasn't as good as I thought it was, or okay, this is actually way better than I thought it was. It takes a little courage to do this, man, because I get a lot of crap for it. But I just don't. I think it's interesting. I think it's cool that I can just kind of weave in and out of liking things and not liking things, and who knows? In 2 or 3
There
years,
are no rules, by the way. Like there's that's what
well,
people
you
don't
wouldn't
really
know
understand.
that listening to the fucking internet. I
No,
mean,
it's true, but like we all need to remember that with all this stuff, with music discourse, there's no actual rules. But sometimes we like to categorize ourselves and define ourselves by what we listen to or what we're not listening to. How that defines us. It literally it's song. They're songs. They're sounds. There's not rules.
well, I want to move on to Green Day here in a second, but before we do that, I want to just tell you there's 5 songs off this record that I really kind of love at this point, man. And
Okay.
the first 4 of them are all within the first few songs.
Okay.
So I'll give you the numbers first, but it's track 1, 3, 4, and 6. That would be Want, Fine Day, Incomplete, and Busy. Those are all songs that like I was shocked. I listened to the first half of the record like twice. Like I got like through like song 6 or 7 and just restarted it and was like, what is going on, bro? Because I couldn't believe I was liking it so much. And I was so shocked by his vocal style because I'd forgotten about all that stuff with his vocal stuff. So this was like I don't know that I've ever heard this album, if I'm honest with you. So there's that. So I don't have any reason to apologize for anything if I've never heard the record. Just like the Clash thing. I'd never heard Give Enough Rope. When I did, I was like, oh, I get it now. Sometimes it just takes hearing something you haven't ever heard. I spent a lot of time with the same 20 records because I was fucking poor growing up and I only had those records. But also the song very much close to the end is called Gutless. I listened to that song probably 4 times today. It's really, really good. But yeah, man, I enjoyed this Jawbreaker deep dive. I think I will give. I know I've never heard. How do I say the second album?
Bivouac.
Bivouac.
I think it's Bivouac.
Whatever. However you pronounce it. I've never even seen that cover before. So like, I'll probably give that one a listen this week at some point just to listen to it. I think I'll probably end up liking it. Okay.
Real quick, I've got Want, Fine Day, Imaginary War, Busy, Softcore, and Driven as sort of my.
We like most of the same songs.
Most of the same ones, yeah, and really, like I always say, Want could be on 24-hour Revenge Therapy. That is like perfect Jawbreaker. All the elements of the Jawbreaker, the I part. That's very much like one of those vocal stylings that they would do. And then you guys did Lagwagon on the other show the other week, and the song Fine Day is totally ripped off by Lagwagon in like 5 songs, and there's one song specifically where the chord progression is just right there. Like, and I spent the early part of the afternoon listening to the first half and middle of Lagwagon songs to find the one, and I couldn't. But just know that Fine Day sounds like a Lagwagon song. Comments, help me out. What song am I thinking of?
Dude, I hate when that happens, when I can't remember something that I know.
Every time I would listen to it, it pops in my head. I'm like, okay, I gotta mention this. I gotta do the research. Let me look real smart. Find the Lagwagon song. And I was driving home from work, just flipping through Lagwagon songs and not finding this exact part.
That's funny, bro. That is hilarious. All right, let's wrap up the Jawbreaker.
All right.
Let's see here. This ought to be an interesting conversation. All the Green Day super fans, which there are so many. There's so many. All right. April 13th, 1990, we get 39 Smooth, the debut album by Green Day on Lookout Records. Okay. When we did our Green Day rankings, I listened to this, and I think I listened to this right after I listened to Kerplunk. I still stand by that I don't, at least right now, care for Kerplunk, right? I think this is a far better album. Maybe. I don't know. I'm not a big Green Day fan either way. Like, I like Green Day, but I'm not like a super fan. So, like, I don't know what the community thinks about any of this, but like, I don't know, man. I think something's changed in my taste, I guess, because I literally dreaded listening to this record. As soon as I said we should listen to it, and you were like, yeah, I was like, cool. And then like the next day I was like, ugh, do I really want to listen to that? And I put it off for like almost 10 days. And then I played it in my car with my kid. Because I was like, well, I can listen to that album because it's not too crazy and it won't bother him too much. And I played it and I listened to like the first few songs and I was like, wait a minute. And I was like, dude, what did I not get about? And I think that there's something that's happening with me in the last
Mhm.
year. I think my tastes have changed a little bit, and I just
Mm.
didn't expect it. And it's happening with so many records that I've in the past didn't have a positive opinion on. But I did write a few things down about this record. I will let you talk about it first for a minute because my notes are not like extensive, but I do want to kind of read them all without stopping, and it's going to take probably like 2 to 3 minutes maybe of reading.
Okay, and so just to set the stage, 39 Smooth, it is their debut album. I think 39 was the working title of it through most of the album. And then for whatever reason, they just started saying smooth, smooth to each other. So they added 39 Smooth to the album, and rock history is made. This album is interesting because it's the only one without Trey Cool. Um, in
That's
their
obvious, actually.
yeah, and that's actually, and it's not really shade on El Sobrante, because I think he's a really good drummer, and these songs, the drumming does not get in the way of any of these songs, but you realize what the secret sauce is in Green Day that this album kind of doesn't have, and it's very much Trey Cool. Um they were weird early on because and Larry Livermore, he's talked about this. He felt their sales early on were a little bit hurt because a lot of people really did like Sweet Children. And so people were confused about the name of the band change from so when Green Day started releasing their early stuff, there were Sweet Children fans who just, again, we don't have the internet back then to sort of spell this out for us to explain that was the same band. And he listened to these songs, and this album could have been released in nearly any decade, and it would probably fit it like all the way back to like the 60s, the late 60s. This could be like a garage rock band, and that would work. It'd work in 70s punk. It works in 80s pop. It'd work today in contemporary music. It's a very timeless record that's not really that affected by, I think, any one specific genre other than really pop rock. They were obviously in the Gilman scene and friendly with those guys, and this sounds like what a lot of pop punk would sound like later on, but I don't think it sounds very pop punky at all, really. I think it just kind of sounds like a proto Green Day, if that makes any sense. It just sounds like
I literally have almost that exact same thing
an
written down.
unrefined version of the sound that they would later like kind of perfect. And it's funny because there's a few songs on here. I have it specifically written down. Going to Pasquale. That song sounds like songs that hadn't been written yet by bands that would be influenced by Green Day. Like not a lot of their catalog actually sounds like those type of pop punk songs that you generally associate the genre, but there is a lot more of that, I think, in these earlier albums than we think of, because we think of the Green Day sound, I think, has been so refined from like Nimrod from Dookie to American Idiot, and we think of that as like the heart of the Green Day sound. But a lot of their reputation as a pop punk band and all that stuff comes from these albums, and you hear some of those proto influences. And I really just think this, similar to the last album, it's a perfect debut album in that it's the distillation of the band without one of their key members. And what Green Day, the funny thing about them is I think the production really helped Green Day. I'm not one who...
Hold on one second. I'm so sorry.
Good.
Anyways, sorry to cut you off like that. That was incredibly rude. I apologize.
Okay, I will say that like Green Day's a band that I wouldn't necessarily worship their unsigned stuff before their signed stuff. So I think them, and really that comes down to, I think their producer Rob Cavallo was just a really good fit with bringing out bringing out that Dookie sound to make that real strong Green Day sound. I think they sound a little too nice and too meek on these earlier albums. They don't quite sound, and maybe they hadn't matured into these snotty bratty kids that they were sort of known for. They're not that yet, and so I actually, even though I like these songs and I think I recognize the talent and they're very catchy, to me, there's something non-Green Day about those two albums because they don't quite have that like snot that they have in those later albums.
So one thing that I've always thought it's gonna okay, it's a very contradicting thought.
Mm-hmm.
Green Day always kind of sounds like Green Day, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, there's definitely like Lookout Green Day, Dookie Nimrod Green Day, American Idiot Green Day, and now there's this later on Green Day that's got like this garage rocky weird sound that they did with the Father of All in their latest record that have a lot more in common than people want to admit. This album, like, okay, I'll tell you what. I'm just gonna read this real fast because I need. This is I had all my thoughts gathered in one place. So like, okay, so the vocals, they weren't as nasally yet, which I really like for Green Day. They were a different kind of vocal. It was still very clearly him singing, and he did a few things that he does later in his career that obviously is Billy Joe.
Mm,
but his vocals were much more clear, projected vocals without having like this weird nasally style that he developed.
mm.
The production was really good on this record for what it was. Like you mentioned the producer, but like the guitar tone, there's a timelessness and also a time stamp on this guitar tone. Like it made me feel like I was in the 90s, dude. I literally was like, damn, this feels like when I was a kid, man. Like
Mm.
this sound just reminds me of like Walkmans and Sam Goody and Coca-Cola and like my mom's work truck that I used to have to wash. And like, you know what I'm saying? Like it
The
just reminded
90s. Yeah.
they reminded me of like, pre-internet, it reminded me of playing outside. Like the guitar tone reminded me of Friends, that stupid TV show. Like it
So
reminded me of
I was gonna say TV shows. A lot of these songs remind me of TV themes from the 90s of just
yeah,
how
so
like the sound of commercials back then. These songs
so
sound like.
one thing that I wrote that's probably going to irritate some purists, I guess, but I don't really care. I wonder why this band was ever considered punk. This album is just more evidence that they are just a great rock and roll power pop band. Great songwriting and vocal melodies, fantastic musicians, of course. Literally nothing about Green Day at this point was punk from my perspective. Lyrically, no. Visually, no. Maybe because they were hanging around the punk scene and were fans of punk rock. That doesn't mean you make punk rock. To be clear, I don't care if you call them punk, and that is very, very. I don't give a shit. Call them whatever you
Mhm.
want. Uh, but this is just a thought that I had when I was listening to the record. But I ride the fence pretty hard when it comes to that topic of whether or not to call them a punk band. So I don't call them what you want. They've always been a great band, but even on albums that I don't really care for, it's objectively good music. You know what I'm saying? And I understand their relevance, but listening to this, I was like, how did they ever get put into the punk category? Like nothing, because I don't think Dookie sounds like a punk album to me. Like Nimrod has the most punk sound as far as I am concerned with Green Day. So like their attitude gets punk later with like American Idiot and shit, but they were just like a rock band. And if you
So
ask Green Day, they've never called themselves a punk band.
um so they get called punk for the most obvious reason is they were a Gilman Street band.
Right.
So,
But that
so the
doesn't
Gil
mean they're punk though.
no, and Gilman had more, but like they again, and they were on the popular. We've talked about this a lot. They were on the popular side of the Gilman Street bands,
Right.
and one of the things that the Gilman crowd didn't like about them is that they, even though they're from some small, they're from a town I think very similar to like where I live now, where it's like kind of a hick town suburb outside of like a big city, so a very uncool part of like big California. But for whatever reason, their music, because of it, I think its tone and stuff, would find like the suburb kids from like the real Ritz parts of town. So those kids would come out to the Gilman shows, and the Gilman
Piss
faithful
off
were
all
like,
the punk kids.
yeah, well, who the hell are these guys? And Ian Winwood's book, he either quoted someone or he said this, and I think he made a good point. He said Green Day were punks who were in the punk scene who played pop music, whereas like guys like the Offspring weren't punks, but they played punk music in the scene. And I think that's probably a good
That's
way
valid.
of framing it. I think though, like again, so I don't think that's like, so this I think sounds like an original sound. It sounds like whatever Green Day. Again, kind of a contradictory thought. I do think Dookie and those records sound like a popified version of like a certain kind of 80s punk. I do understand that pop punk framing there, but we've talked about it many times. Green Day is a very different band than a lot of these other bands that we talk about and how their presentation. I think ultimately because they are of all the bands associated with punk, they're the most commercially successful. They're sort of like
Right.
they're like the legacy of punk, and like as history will go down and all that. And it is funny because they spent 10 years with everyone who was related to punk hating them. Nobody, we talk about the crap at Jawbreaker took. No one took crap in music history worse than Green Day did for
Right.
signing to a major.
They still take crap from people,
They,
dude.
they honestly they took it for a lot of other bands that got to do that a lot more peacefully years after
Dude, I
years
had a
after they
guy
did.
in my live stream dying on this hill, bro. He was telling me that I was out of my mind when I said that a band like Green Day and bands like Offspring getting as big as they got affected street punk. And I'm like, dude, even now, people can't accept the fact that those bands blowing up helped bands exist that might not have existed and certainly wouldn't have been as popular as they were and accessible as they were. So, like, you got bands that you wouldn't have gotten because of these bands. And, like,
Mm.
whether they're punk or not is a stupid ass conversation. It just happens so much that I kind of think of it all the time. Like, on a Monday I might go, yeah, Green Day's punk rock, and then on a Tuesday I might go, nah, I don't hear anything about it because it's like sonically I don't feel like I hear anything about it. They don't look like they're punk, but like their attitude is most certainly punk rock. So like I think that's the gray line that they walk, the gray area that they habitate is that the right word? Yeah. No.
Inhabit or inhibit or
Inhabit.
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 Yeah.
Thank you. Bro, my brain is like, got him again. But that's where they hang out. It's in this weird gray area where like they're very much of that ilk, but like their music isn't necessarily, it's more
Well,
akin to like Beach Boys music. And you're like, oh, it's like good pop rock and roll, but like, and they're also at the same time like, we're gonna do whatever the fuck we want, which is very punk rock. So like it's
and I've had that thought a lot over the years. Like, so normally when you and I have this conversation, I turn my brain off because I hate the what is punk and what is not punk conversation.
yeah.
But with Green Day, I think it's a lot more intellectually honest because I think there's like you look at their debut album and you look at a lot of this stuff, it doesn't necessarily have those trimmings of punk. With that said, I think that they were just almost like burdened with punk in that because
Well,
of their fame was like you're a punk band from this punk scene that got you're responsible for all this. Everyone from your scene maybe hates you. You have to bring like people are going to judge punk rock based on what you do. Like so for better or worse, they are like I don't know if the flag bearer necessarily. I don't think they're the standard for punk, and they would never even claim I think to be that. But there's
I don't know. They might be. They might be because of stuff that has nothing to do with punk. Because, like you said, it's other people doing this, not punk rockers. So, like, can you imagine if they were on a different label that wasn't Lookout with the exact same record? The exact same record came out, but they were from, let's say, Seattle or even Chicago, right? They're from one of these other cities. They weren't on Lookout, but they had the exact same sound. You're telling me that people wouldn't have called them punk if they were like hanging out with Alkaline Trio? Are you fucking kidding me? Of course they would have been called punk rock, dude, because Alkaline Trio got called punk rock and they sound incredibly similar when you take out the vocals. You just listen to the music, there's a ton of similarities, right? Similar, okay? People don't get all mad. Similar, like just like fast rock and roll with a lot of pop, but it's got like a little snarl behind it. That's all I mean, okay?
Mhm.
So like Lawrence Arms has a lot of similarities, but they're not the same band, okay? But like, if you take away Lookout and you take away Gilman and you just go, "Hey, Green Day," I think that's what pisses people off is that they're from Gilman. When you think of Gilman, you think of Operation Ivy, you think of Filth, you think of Crimshine, you think of Grimple, even like you think of all these bands. You don't think of like poppy sounds, but in reality, all those bands, dude, Grimple's music. Go listen to Grimple up your ass, dude. Hella pop. Go listen to my interview with Greg. He talks about how cool Green Day was when they played. Their shows were awesome. You can tell that he doesn't give a shit. That he just want to have a good time, play great music. Like their pop is important. Pop sounds are important because that's what you get. Do people that listen to like just blast beats over fucking grindcore music, like, dude, there's a reason why that shit will never be popular. It's like
Mhm.
you can't make a living doing that because it's not objectively good. I guess I think
Well,
whatever. But
it's
like
just yeah, and
it's
I think
abrasive to a degree that
a lot
makes
of
people.
popular music is based on abrasive music and taken I mean that's a lot of what Green Day does is they take pieces from more abrasive music and put it in there. The thing with that is too, and there's two things you're talking about. I think the Gilman thing is important. So I think people like me in my generation have so much reverence for like everything Gilman because it's like the birth, it's basically the cradle of everything I like comes out of either Gilman
I
or
feel that.
LA. Um, I from what I get, and again, I wasn't there at the time. So, but
Right.
everything I have researched at the time seems to within the underground punk scene, Gilman was very disliked. Because again, Gilman is for the Operation Ivies, for the Green Day, for the bands that the girls like, that the younger kids like, that are under 21, that are a little more silly, that have a lot of these poppy tones that come out of the Gilman. Like I think someone was talking about one of the more heavier bands from Gilman and talking about how it's funny, it was almost a reverse scene. They didn't fit in at Gilman because they were more of a conventional punk band and all the you have Green Day shows and Operation Ivy shows and kids are on tricycles in the middle of the circle pit at Gilman. It's just so from the way it's been presented, like the Dead Kennedys fan, the Black Flag fan, he's like 28 in 1990 and he thinks all this Gilman stuff is horrible. And then he sees the Gilman stuff be the stuff that's capitalized that becomes like
Well,
the famous stuff. And that guy really hates that stuff.
part of it is that when you're like 25 to 28, you really hate kids. Like you hate
Teenager.
them.
Yeah.
You hate teenagers because you're
Mhm.
just out of that. So like when you said all the tricycle thing, my first thought was this club down here called Trip Six, and I was like, oh yeah, I like Trip Six. They have ramps in their club, and I fucking hate it. I'm 43, dude. But if I was 18, I think that shit was amazing. I'd be in there skateboarding while I'm listening to punk bands play. So like punk is very much a youthful movement. People like me need to exist because I'm a lifer that's got adult money now and I can do things to help out the scene. But the
Mhm.
people that are crucial to punk every day are the people that are young. So it changes every year. It's a different group of people that are incredibly important. Uh, what Green Day is or is not, I don't care. Are they good? I think that they are a good band. I think they've got far more good music than they do bad music. I don't know why I didn't like this album so much, because when I listened to it today, I really had a great time listening to it. One thing I wrote down that I would like to hear your response to is like, I can only imagine being a major label head and hearing this debut record. I would have been foaming at the fucking mouth. Can you imagine hearing this and being like, oh shit, I see what this is fixing to be, and being like, hey guys, come over here, and they're like, hey, we're chilling over here. I'm like, no, gotta come sign this contract. I'd have been trying to shark them motherfuckers, dude. Like, because like I can hear it from a '90s perspective. I can listen to it because I was alive in the '90s, so I know how people behaved, and I'm like, man, I wish I'd have heard this record when I was really young, because I didn't hear this until way later in life. I heard this probably post Nimrod. Like Nimrod is like when I started going, okay, I think I really do like this band. I went back and found the first two records, and I don't really think they ever really resonated with me. But if I had heard this first, I might have liked it a lot way back when. But I'm coming from that. I have to say that a lot, because a lot of bands, I hear them from their popular music, and I have to go back into their discography. And it's just, it is what it is, man. It's the way of the world for me.
Yeah, so the major label thing's interesting because they didn't, kind of like we're talking about Jawbreaker, they didn't play nice with major labels for a really long time. And in fact, they were the ones who tipped off Rancid that, like, hey, there was an A&R guy that dyed his hair green to come to our meeting. And so they were, Green Day was really important in, like, they would get info.
That would be so annoying.
Yeah. Imagine how disingenuous.
Cringe. That's cringe. That's the definition of cringy.
Like, if you're gonna be a label guy, just be your old label guy stuff. Wear your cowboy boots. Sign me, great. We'll shake hands. We'll have the boot. But we're gonna like pretend to be cool punk rocker, dude. Like,
he's probably wearing a suit still.
Yeah, that is the lamest thing ever. Which is why it wasn't until, again, we talked about it earlier, until Rob Cavallo came around, who is like, he's this punk rocker dude who's an A&R producer at the label who's about to get fired because none of his bands are hits because he keeps signing these underground bands that don't take off. And
pause real fast. When you said that a second ago about the guy dyed his hair green, my brain went straight to Rob Lowe in Wayne's World. Dude, I thought I was like, yeah, the guy in Wayne's World, bro.
I think that's such a good service that Green Day did by passing that story along to all the other bands in the scene.
Dude, for real.
So it really, like Rancid talked about it, they were a lot more selective with like the meetings they took because of Green Day's experience of going through all this. But yeah, absolutely. If you would have heard, because this sounds more like mid-90s in my, again, because I wasn't there. So again, this probably stuff was more in the underground, but I wasn't there. This sounds like the mid-90s stuff that would have been popular. I have no reason to think that if this had a major label backing, maybe it's not as big as Dookie or some of those other albums. It would have been a hit though, without a doubt. This thing gets mass distributed. So. Especially with like a younger crowd, I think they would have really taken this. Now, the only thing I don't think is on there is like that one maybe big song that would have been like the big hit.
I think the whole album is a higher quality than that, though. There's not a lot of filler on this record. That's the issue. Is that like when you have an album that doesn't have any filler, but it doesn't also have like a fucking crazy, very clear banger. Everything's just like an 8 out of 10. You're like, oh, well, where's the hit? It's like the whole album is the hit, because the only song I didn't really care for is Rest. Other than that, the whole record is really good.
And that's the only song that's a departure too, I think, of all the songs.
Right.
Way out of left field, yeah.
Well, then you have like Judge's Daughter. I think that could have been a good song because it has a crazy guitar solo in it, and that I think could have set them apart. I think that song is the one that stuck out to me the most. But I wanted to tell you this, dude. I wrote this down. I know I said it earlier, but I wrote it down earlier in the week, and I didn't realize that I'd written it down. But it's funny that I basically parroted this earlier. I said, this album is one I've notoriously not liked in the past. What is happening to me over the last year or so? And I put, LOL, all my tastes are shifting, more like they're broadening, I guess. It's wild. People just change, I guess. What the fuck are people going to say about this? And that's what I wrote down. Because, like, I think the one thing that I like about myself is that I'm willing to just eat it, bro. It is what it is, and it makes for a great conversation. I enjoy the comments, even when they're negative towards me sometimes. Overall, I get a pretty positive response, but I got called a poser the other day by some guy because he thinks that I just discovered oi music, and I was like, boy, you haven't paid much attention, but all right, yeah, sure, whatever, buddy. Like, the comments are a pretty fun place to hang out sometimes.
So what's the rule on there? In order to not be a poser, you have to discover something, study it in the monastery for 20 years, and then present it on YouTube, right?
Yeah, you have to be like, when you're 10 years old and you've never heard of punk rock, you still have to understand what it is. You have to wear like either boots or Converse at age like 11, anything past 12 and you're not wearing strictly band tees and you have absolutely a mohawk throughout your whole school, like everything, 6th grade through 12th, right? You better have a tattoo before you're out of school. You better have some piercings. You better get expelled. And you better not like the casualties. Other than that, yeah, there's a bunch of fucking rules, dude. I'm learning these rules as I
I,
go on with this YouTube thing.
I can check boxes on both sides of those.
Well, like it's just so silly, bro.
It's dumb.
People get so mad at me because I like Blink-182's older material, and I'm like, bro, I've bashed Blink-182 on this channel more than I've praised them. Like, give me a break, dude. Like, who cares what I like other than like it's my channel? Like, I don't understand this. Scroll through YouTube and you go, huh, a video about Green Day. I hate that band. Click. Like, what are you? Why would you watch a video? Like, if somebody watches this conversation that hates Green Day, why? Please tell me why. Is it because you like Rob and I? If that's the case, okay, I kind of understand that. But even then, like topically, you want to waste your whole half hour listening to us talk about a band you don't like?
That is funny, especially something like this where we're not really engaging the audience in like this hot take about the band. Say if you hated the band and we had we had something crazy on the thumbnail, why would you watch that? Like,
right.
two nerds talking about
The thumbnail's gonna be like debut album from important pop punk band, like or something, pop punk pioneers debut album, and then it'll have like a question mark or something with like a blurred out vision, image of the album cover where it's very clearly Green Day. Like it's just a nice looking generic thumbnail. Like I don't have the hot topic shit. I hate it, dude. I don't. I almost went that direction early on in my career doing this stuff, and I'm so glad that I decided to go with just reviewing music and talking about shit I like. Because, dude, to keep up with being like bombastic all the time,
yeah.
Well, like, okay, look, dude, I'm gonna preface this with saying this is not shit talking. There's no ill will here. It is just an observation. Have you seen Dan Frampton's stuff lately?
No. Whenever he makes punk rock content, it will come up on my thing. But
okay, so I guess he shifted over to doing this like bad boy of YouTube stuff. And he has this new shtick where he wears like a leather jacket and he's sunglasses. And I guess he's like, I know it's a shtick. I know that he's like that guy. So I understand that it's like a character, right? But I feel like if he would just like pump the brakes and go into the more thoughtful content, that he would get over this little lull he's having. He got like a weird, stupid dude. He got screwed, man. Like he got screwed over because he got a terms of service strike. And that will get you shadow banned. Like you can't do that. And he got it for bullying, but what I saw wasn't, I didn't consider it bullying. So I am on Dan's team here. For anybody that's wondering, like that's my friend at this point.
You
like
guys
we're
are
not
friends,
like we're not best friends, but like we're buddies, man. That's my dude. I got no issue with anything he does. I just see it and go, I wonder if that's the right path. But I mean, what am I talking about? He's got 60% more subscribers, 70% more subscribers than I've got. So what do I know? But like, I do wonder, like, man, is that the right path to take? And I don't really know how to address it other than just to voice it on a channel, a video. And maybe somebody will say something to him and he'll hit me up, or maybe he'll take it the wrong way. I don't fucking know. That's.
Well, and so like not so much on this show, but like on the other podcast I host, not related to punk rock, I do feel like I play a bit of a character on there, and not really, just like an exaggerated version of myself. But people who have never met you would probably not be surprised to find out you're not playing a character on any media. That this is who you are at like 6 a.m. This is who you are at 9 p.m. This is kind of who you are all the time.
Yeah, I don't have the energy to play a character, man, because I don't have to keep it up when I'm not like.
You're too much of a character naturally, to be honest. You bring a lot of energy all the time, right?
I've been told that. I didn't want to say it myself because that feels kind of arrogant and
it's a compliment, though. But
I appreciate it. I didn't want to say that myself, but like I've been told, like, yeah, you're good for this because you're kind of a wild dude. You're polarizing, and I think that's pretty accurate. And so, and I got a lot of respect for Dan, man. He takes a lot of shit from people, and his character is his character. I mean, I just saw it and I was surprised. And we had talked a little bit, and I knew that he was dealing with like lulls in viewership, and I was like, dude, I think he's like trying to force the algorithm to pick his stuff up, and I don't know if you can do that. So it's an interesting experiment.
Was on the brand new get like them reassembling. So
wait, what? The band brand new?
Yeah. So I think he's hitting on this top. I mean, if I was making like current, I guess, music content, that's probably what I would make a video on like today. So I think he's kind of hitting that current
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah, well, he's always kind of stayed on like hot topic issues and stuff. Like he'll cover stuff that I won't cover, which that
Yeah,
makes him that's good. I think if we both covered the exactly same stuff, we would have a lot of it would be boring.
a lot of
Like,
the same content.
yeah, man. Like I like that we're a little different. We're different people.
Yeah, he's good at covering feuds. I think that's really his specialty. Is like when people
Yeah, well,
when things have beef with each other, he's good at sort of chronicling that.
I will say this. He said, "I love making schlock." He said this shit on my channel, and I was like, "Interesting," because I
Mm.
don't. It is exhausting to me. And so whenever I saw him do this stuff, I was like, "Oh, he's leaning into his like that's his jammy jam, dude. That's his stuff." Which again, I just don't necessarily understand it. I should probably just hit him up and go, "Hey, what's up with this?" Like, because I don't have a problem with it. I'm
Yeah,
a little curious, and I wonder if it's like working. I hope it is. I hope it's getting him a lot. I hope it's getting him back where he was. I know he was just stressing out, bro. That strike thing would have really fucked me up, man. I'm glad I didn't have to deal with that. I thought he got kind of screwed.
because that messes up the whole visibility of your channel and all
Yeah,
kinds of
man.
stuff. When,
And I think it's bogus what he got hit with the TOS thing is like for bullying. He was talking about. I think he was talking about Logan Paul, bro. What are we talking about? That guy is a scumbag. Why can't we talk shit about him? Like, what are we doing? But yeah, man. Back to Green Day. I don't even
yes,
remember how we got on Dan for a minute. I don't remember
yeah.
what
So we're talking about making it big or classic music or something, and it somehow
yeah.
snowballed into this. What do you think? Do you get a little okay? So my favorite songs on this album tend to be songs like 16, I Was There, Road to Acceptance. They're more melancholy, reflective ones, but this is where the time that has passed actually kind of hurts this album just a little. Like there's an earnestness about being 17 and wishing that your youth was still with you and all that good stuff. But it is a little hard to take with these guys again that are like in their 60s now. Like, I wonder how they look back on those songs, like honestly, and not from a
What do
way
you
of it.
mean?
Well, because a lot of this album, again, Road to Acceptance, I Was There, those songs, they're like these reflective songs about this bygone era. But again, they wrote it when they were 17. So I'm
Yeah.
sure they still have those reflections of that bygone era and it still feels the same. It's just funny to me how like earnest they sound in those in those things that I don't know if I'm doing the thing that people do to pop punk sometimes where it feels like the stakes are kind of low in what they're singing about. And I kind of feel that way just like it gets a little bit almost like nauseating of like how much of these songs were just like time has passed, things are never going to be the same. You know what I mean? It's a little too
Well,
melancholy for like just being 17 from in
I
my
see. I
opinion.
disagree. I think that in the '90s there was a lot of this kind of feeling going on. There was
Mhm.
a lot of mystery to what's going to happen to you in the next 5 to 10 years because you're young and we didn't have the internet and there was a lot of reason to like just be like honestly worried, like
Mhm.
nervous, and you felt unprepared. And I look at this as a chapter in their lives, and I think the songs are just as good now as they were then. And I don't look at it like I look at bands as an example. When I listen to like Let's Go, that
Mhm.
Rancid album, for anybody who's wondering, I don't listen to that record and go, huh, they're Tim Armstrong's 57 still playing this. I'm like, no, dude, this is what they were feeling in 1993. This is what they were feeling when they were young men, and I can put myself back into that. And I think that this is what reminiscing is all about. This is
Mhm.
what I don't like to think about the past very often. I always like to think about right today, right now, in the future. But whenever I have time to think about the past, it's best done with music because
Absolutely.
you can play a song and it'll put you back in a memory, or it'll put you back in a time and a place. And there's girls that I don't like to think about, and so there's songs that when I hear them, I don't want to hear the songs. It puts me in that frame of mind, right? But sometimes I'd like to think about like my old relationships, not in like a romantic way, but like just like or romantic in like
The time of your life. Yeah.
romanticizing being young. And I'm like, man, that was a good time, dude. That girl sucked, but I had a good time, man. My friends were cool, man. I had good music, and she sucked and she broke my heart, but that's why I ended up writing this song. That's why I ended up meeting these people because I went to the bar and hung out. And so, like, listening to these songs do that to me. And this one has a feel of a 1992 sound. It's like a
Mhm.
time capsule on disc, man. It's pretty interesting.
Um, and I do think Green Day, and I have that's something else I have in my notes. I do think they are the best ever lyrically at communicating that feeling though of like it sucks to like a lot of punk music is that sort of thesis of it sucks to grow up. But I think in their late like I just don't think they do as good of a job on this album as they would do
Well, they were all kids still, so I mean,
yeah,
yeah.
so to me there is a certain and again like I think framing it of how they feel about it's probably the wrong way because they probably if I get any piece of artwork or something I did when I was 17, I would have a certain sentimental and a attachment to those feelings because I will know those feelings
Well,
were real because
and
I
like a
really had them.
testament. You'll love it and have like sentimental value to it, but you'll also go, ugh.
Yeah. And I do think that is Green Day. Green Day has two lyrical lanes, and they're both actually the basis to every song on this album, which is really that angst about growing up. And you talk about it going into the 90s. I mean, there's all kinds of research on that. That's the end of history era, and people really did think we solved like humanity in the 90s. So what the hell? Like all that was left was for the world to end or whatever. You know what I mean? It's a lot different
Dude,
than the 2000s. We've just seen chaos, and we just sort of live with chaos. It's a little bit. We're just like, no, the end of the world is happening. It's just going to take like 100 years. That's kind of been our mentality in the
you remember
2000s.
you remember Y2K?
Oh yeah, I
That
remember my
shit was,
stepdad
dude,
going to the
look,
freezer and loading up all the meat and all that stuff.
dude, I'm gonna be real honest, man. On Y2K, I was terrified. I was
Yeah.
like, "What's fixing to happen, man?" And because I'm easy to rile up and I over worry about everything. So like, you can just whisper in my ear and it'll fuck up a whole month of my life. So like, uh,
I think it's
yeah,
great
man,
that we were afraid of Y2K, but the next 20 years would be much worse than whatever we thought was going to happen on
man,
Y2K.
man, we're in a hot mess right now, dude. We are in a
Uh,
mess right now.
which is why music will always be relevant, no matter. It'll always have something to say. Like there is so often when I will find music that's older that feels like it fits the current moment, and it's like they didn't write that about that. That wasn't inspired by it, but it's like they get it, even if they didn't get that. That these as much
Well,
as the world seems to change, yeah, I think human emotions and feelings are kind of universal.
history repeats itself.
Mhm.
So timeless music will always be relevant. This is
Mhm.
why bands like Green Day are important. This is why American Idiot is got this like resurgence whenever uh
Every
Trump
time
came into
a
office.
Republican gets elected, I feel like American Idiot gets into the top 10.
Yeah, that and like no effects songs start to be more popular again.
Yeah, if I
Um,
if I was Green Day, I would just start donating money on the slide to the RNC. That way, my albums could stay gold forever.
like, dude, yeah, man, I just ugh. So the two songs that I like the most, okay, the
Mhm.
whole album, the only song that I didn't care for was Rest, but the two songs that really stuck out to me were Don't Leave Me and The Judge's Daughter. I also think Why Do You Want Him was one that had another guitar part that I really liked in it. Um, it's a strong record, man. I think
Mhm.
both of these albums are going to hover around 8.5 to me, whereas like just 1 year ago, I would have probably given them both a 5 or lower, which I think is pretty amazing, man.
Yeah, I think we need to whenever we create Punk Rock You, we need to make people listen to this album as a debut album just to get the full context of Green Day and just to get the full thing because I think it does answer a lot of questions. The early I tend to go away from the early two albums more than I probably should. And I think they're a little more important than that, not only to their evolution, but like you got to remember they're a big band even when they were an underground band. So this stuff is
Yeah.
still also it's not just Dookie that like all those bands that came out in 94, they didn't get inspired by Dookie and write albums. A lot of
Well,
them were already around, and this stuff is around, and so this stuff is popping. Dookie is just the bomb that sets everything off. I will say, Disappearing Boy is one that I have always loved, and it's one that I feel like could have been one of their hits like years later. Like it's the first time they're really being ironic in the things they're saying and really catchy and cute in their lyrics. Another one that I mentioned it a few times is I really like Road to Acceptance. Now it's kind of a long song, and the beginning I don't like Billy's vocal performance. I think he was trying something a little bit different, and it's a little acapella, and it just kind of it doesn't get to me. But then as it goes, it starts like just digging in. It starts digging into me, and to me, like that song, maybe if they because I think they recorded this, in true punk rock style in like 2 days or something like that when they
yes,
actually
that's what
tracked
it
this.
said. It said 2 days on the Wikipedia page.
Yeah, I think Road to Acceptance, had they had a little more time, is a song they could have built into one of those kind of big Green Day hit kind of songs that has a lot of different little parts in it, the way like Longview and some of those bigger songs that they have. I don't know about Rest. I think it's a cool kind of song. It just
I
doesn't
don't like it.
really blend in on this album. I've written down it's like a song from a weird Woodstock band,
Yep.
and it's odd. And I like again, so this song or a Rest or like the title track song, title band song, Green Day, they're more of a stoner band than a hardcore drug band. So
Yeah.
instead of like being
Yes.
a band on acid and so much alcohol like all these other bands in the punk scene, they're more like stoners. So they have a lot of songs about, whether it's Brain Stew, Longview, Green Day, of just being like really high and sitting in your room and trying to figure, like, as they're having all the anxiety about growing up, they're really stoned and watching reruns in their room. And that just sounds like the early 90s in so many like you wonder why they're sort of the avatar of like early 90s slacker culture. I think they're actually a much better avatar then like
Slacker culture is a very good description
yeah, and
of
the
like
90s is
the
kind of the
sound.
slacker era. And I think people associate that with like the Kurt Cobain kind of like grungy dude, but I think this is the middle of the like this is more of I think of the culture of that time. Green Day, even though this is early 90s, but their entirety of the 90s, and we've talked about this a few times. I think they capture a lot of that moment. And you said it's timeless, but they are very much a cultural moment. Especially in the 90s. I think after that, they kind of just sound like their own thing, or they're sort of
Right.
pioneers and other people.
Well,
But
they
really,
have
in the
their own sound. There is a Green Day template, but people, it's just like, dude, there's a few bands like that, man. Green Day, Rancid does it, where you can try to copy them, but you're not going to sound like them
well, and
because
after
Rancid has like Tim, Lars, and Matt, which you can't replicate that. This is a very unique sound,
40
but
years of
so,
yeah,
so is Billy Joe, Trey Cool, and Mike Dirnt. They have a specific like chemistry between the three of those guys. Uh, honestly, Blink 182, even when they make songs I don't care about, they have a chemistry that you can't really replicate. This is why when Matt Skiba came in, who I think is a superior, or not, maybe not superior, but equal songwriter, it didn't sound the same and people didn't care for it as much because there was a chemistry that was missing. Dude, do you hear that they played a show together and they played some songs
yeah,
with all four of them?
yeah.
I'm
I
so
watched that footage.
sad that I did.
I
Oh,
I was shocked that you weren't like reporting that like it was breaking news in the middle, and then you were having people on to react.
dude,
That was like CNN for you.
I've been so busy, dude. I didn't even know it happened.
I watched the clip just so I figured we would. I don't remember if it was like a couple weeks ago because I knew I would have to talk about it on the show. I'm stunned that you didn't because you have so much passion about that whole scenario. I thought that was
I
really
do.
the. I was expecting to look at the comments and just to be like, "F you, punk rock review." I told you they get along. I was expecting that. Everyone was like, "Oh,
Oh, I
cool, how
dude,
awesome that is."
I think that I still stand behind what I said about it all. I still think that this has been resolved, which is fine too. Why wouldn't it get resolved? They're adults, but they
Mm.
should have resolved it, and they did. Okay. I don't understand the controversy
Well,
behind that, but
I think it was very specific that they did a fundraiser show and had that be the hook, because
right.
like you've been pointing out for a while, you wanted to see when Blink reformed with Tom, you thought it would be an awesome if they did a world tour and Alkaline Trio was the support band, and basically to do a bit of a set like that. They didn't. This is
Yeah.
probably as close as we're ever going to really get to that. But I think
Because they're not like the best of friends. Let's be honest. Like it's because they're not like, I just want to hang out with you all the time. They could do that with no problems if they really wanted to. No problems.
maybe I think it's a little bit. It might be more of a like too much of a gimmick and too much of a talking point for a tour.
No,
That
just one tour? No, bro. Do like
you don't think
20
that would
days.
suck in every interview they sit down for? Well, what is it like now that you guys? I
Yeah,
think that would
okay, but the
wear
thing
them
is
out.
like, but that's the interview they got anyways. Whenever they broke up, whenever they had Matt come on, whenever Matt left, they still got that. So that's the interview because that's what they've been. That's what they did as a man, as musicians, as artists. That they did that. They did those things. They did change like that. So of course they're gonna get those questions. That's not why they're not doing it. They're not doing it because, and I'm not saying that they're like enemies. I'm just saying
What
like
evidence do you have
they're
that they don't
not.
get along though? That's you're the only person that's ever put that out there.
I'm not saying that they like argue and hate each other. I'm just saying everybody is telling me, no, dude, they're like really great friends. I'm saying that sounds like bullshit to me. If they were really great friends, then they would have already had this figured out because it's too perfect. It makes too much sense. It's right there. And it's like, dude, if okay, you're telling me that if you and I uh we got like famous doing this podcast, right? You had to go bounce, take care of your kiddo. I then hang out with Nitty for a while, right? I
Mhm.
come back. I ask, are you have some free time again? I ask you to come on, and then hey, would you want to do like a couple of shows with Nitty? Like if me and you just hated each other, or if you just hated Nitty, that would never happen, right? But if you were good friends with him and you were like, hey, I think I like that guy, it wouldn't be hard to do it. You'd be like, yeah, why not? Like it's not the same, but it's like,
But
it,
I think you think of the way you and I think of Skiba, and I don't think that's the way that everybody thinks of that whole like
what do you
it's
mean?
not. I just think like
Hmm.
the Blink 182
That
Skiba
that I
era.
think he's great. Not everybody thinks he's
Yeah,
great.
and
Okay.
I like yeah, like you said, I prefer 90% of what he's done over anything Blink 182 has done just because
Right.
I like Alkaline Trio better than Blink.
That's a
But
valid point.
I don't think all of that and is that important to a lot of people.
Except that if they were actually the friends that the people say that they are, it wouldn't matter
But do
because they
you
would
think
be.
but you're just assuming Alkaline Trio wants to be a support band on a major tour where like that, like you're just assuming that too. Like it's not like that proposal was out there and they turned that
It
down.
takes a lot of assumptions to make comments like this. Yeah, it's an
No.
assumption. That is, yeah, I didn't. I mean, like, most of the stuff that we talk about that's not on paper is assumption based. Like
Sure.
I like it's like, the reason that I say it wouldn't be hard is because look at what Green Day and Rancid did. We all know that they're friends.
Mhm.
And then they were like, "Hey, want to come tour?" Yeah, sure. Do you
I
think
I I
Rancid
l
couldn't have headlined their own tour and done just as well? Of course they
yeah,
could have. But like,
but
why not
yeah,
go out with the homies?
I love that tour though because I got so much photos of like Tim and Lars with other musicians I really like that they would never have got photo ops with had they not been on tour with Green Day. And
What do
there's
you mean?
this like there's the one photo of it's
Sorry.
like my whole algorithm is together. There is a photo of James Hetfield, CM Punk, Tim Armstrong
Oh, yeah, I've
hanging
seen
out,
that.
laughing and talking, and I was like, that's a photo that only exists because Rancid was on this tour with. I mean,
Yeah,
and
that is weird.
the Metallica and Rancid guys have been friendly for a lot of years. They come from the same area. That
Yeah, and Lars loves wrestling, so he's like his best friend CM Punk, I think.
yeah, and it was just funny though because like, and there was a lot of other little things where you would see people shouting out Rancid and like Rancid is kind of they were kind of on that tour the legendary opening band that kind of comes like
Yeah.
when you're a kid you see a band you have no idea who these legends are. That was probably what that was to a lot of people. So I loved that tour for all the photo ops and all that like all the places that Rancid got to be. And I wonder for them, how cool was it to play? How short were their sets? Probably the shortest sets they'd played in
Dude, they
years,
were like
right?
24 minutes or some crazy shit. I was like,
Yeah,
"What the fuck?"
shorter than a Warp Tour set. I like,
I was
and I'm sure they
so
got paid pretty
I
well. That
was
was
so disappointed in that.
yeah, that's gotta be hard for. Well, you and I both would have like that's the band I would want to go see most of. Smashing Pumpkins, Green Day, and Rancid. Like you
I
can even
hate
flip that
Smashing
bill around.
Pumpkins. Um, all right, let's wrap this thing up. I have to go take a walk with my kid and then
Yeah,
do my live stream at 8:30. But yeah, man, that was fun, dude. I think overall, both of these records were incredibly refreshing to hear as a 43-year-old and not like a youngster that's like just full of angst and anger. And uh, I kind of enjoy that my palate is changing. I think it's great that my tastes are evolving. I think that it's at least for the health of my channel and then my mental state. I think it's good to change a little bit. I don't change a lot of things. I don't change the way I dress, and I don't change the way I eat very often. So, like, music is another big part of my life. It's cool that I can. I'm open to just evolving. I don't know. Some people don't think it's okay. Some people do. Whatever. Let me know how you hate me in the comments.
and one last word I'll say on both these albums. I think they're really good albums. In if you want to just see the sources, the original forms of both of these bands, because
Right.
it's not what one of the things like they were a metal band and then they turned into this band. Both of these debut albums are early, just proto versions of the bands that they would become. So I think if you're a fan of either band, even if you don't love listening to debut albums, that's not your thing. I think they're worthwhile at least giving one listen to every now and then, just sort of contextualize each band.
I would say I would go even further and saying if you're a fan of either of these bands and you don't like either of these albums, then I would question why. Because
You're probably not actually a fan of
right,
these
I
bands.
think
Yeah.
because I think that this would maybe not their peak, but I do think it's their most pure
Yeah.
state.
If you found this objectionable, then it wouldn't be for you, period.
Right, like this is the most pure Green Day record that I've heard, I think, because it's just so clearly pure, youthful, you know, vigor. And same with the Jawbreaker record. His
Mm.
vocals were so badass on that album, and I'm like, it's just like, well, that will never happen again. So enjoy this album.
Thank God
So
music is captured in that
yeah,
ephemeral.
yeah.
It's pure.
This is a fun conversation, man. I hope we have a good time like this in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Next week I'll be gone anyway, so it won't matter. So 2 weeks or so we'll be back with
Yeah.
some Ramones core stuff. I'm gonna have a shitload of footage because I'm taking 2 phones, a GoPro, and a camera with like 4 different memory cards and a shitload of backup batteries because I've got press credentials for all this stuff. Let's go, dude. Don't hang up quite yet, Rob. I got one more quick question for you. All right, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out. We appreciate it. This is kind of a long episode. It's been a while since we've done one that kind of just went long. I think that's the sign of a good conversation. So thank you if you're still here. If you're not, whatever. All right, later, everybody.